investing here will not automatically transform and able to mitigate those risks?
Well, it's not as if we're not doing it already. Canadian businesses have already found ways to operate inside of the system in many different sectors. I can think of a Canadian company that's one of my favorites that is in the Tatanano supply chain. That took a lot of doing for them to get to that point, but they've got a technology in roll-formed steel that is not just applying to the auto sector, but is actually being used in a number of different segments inside of the Indian economy. This is a medium-sized corporation that's operating on the 401 belt in Toronto, whose CEO has decided, I've got to do business in India. And almost solely, just on his own, he had a vision for this. He came and started knocking on doors over here. And so there are businesses like that are already operating here. And they're talking right across Canada about their experience. They're not ashamed to talk about their experience. So they've found a way. Now, that's part one. Part two is, I believe that because of the internal pressures inside of India and the external pressures to actually make this happen, when you've got corporations and people working together, I don't think politicians can stand in the way of that. That is a very substantial juggernaut. So it could be that the means for making this happen don't solely come from visionaries inside of public policy. They're imposed on public policy by the inexorable pressure that's being put onto the system by private agents in the economy that want to see something happen. So that's a bit of wand waving, I know. I mean, it's a bit of wishful thinking, but there are precedents in the past for economies where the government just can't hold people back anymore. The opportunity is there, and anybody that stands in the way just gets rolled over. Yes.
So, for major Canadian investments to occur in Indian manufacturing sector, what is the major policy, Indian policies, or Indian infrastructure, or it is just sheer inertia, it is not happening?
I think in some respects it's lack of vision that keeps it from happening on both sides. Infrastructure is definitely on the radar screen of Canadian businesses. They want to make sure. Canadian businesses are, many of them in the manufacturing sector have been under the duress of large multinational corporations, primarily in the United States, but not exclusively, who have very stringent requirements for quality and for time and for other aspects of processing and margins, costs, and so forth. So, this duress has actually leaned out the Canadian manufacturing system, but it's created expectations there that they're going to be able to operate in real time with the same kind of efficiency. It's mighty frustrating to come into an economy where, whereas you're calibrated to getting things, the auto sector has actually got the seats arriving in the plant just as the automobile is coming down. And that's how sophisticated the just-in-time systems are. When you're talking about days of delay or a power outage that sort of shuts things down with no recourse, it's a mighty frustration to a company that wants to come in and do that kind of thing. But even so, the companies that are operating there have found ways of getting around that. In Canada, you don't necessarily have to create your own power generation facilities. You do that. And so, I'm being simple about these solutions, but the point is, even although there are great hurdles, folks are finding ways around it. We're very creative when it comes to the profit motive.
So that means that as far as policy decisions of Indian government are concerned, and the policy system in India is there, it's okay in your perspective?
It's adequate.
It's adequate.
Great need for improvement. There's no question about that. Any prosperity that actually gets in the way of the reform agenda is a really bad thing. And many think that the high rates of growth over the last while caused governments in India to get lethargic about the process. Well, growth starts to decelerate, and guess what happens? All of a sudden, the reforms are back on the table again. And I'm amazed to actually be here. I wrote a commentary. I have a weekly commentary that I publish back in Canada. And as soon as that news was released, I said, I got to write about this. I was very enthusiastic about it. And I wrote it and I published it, and I thought maybe I was a little too enthusiastic because I didn't really check how this was going to be received in India. Well, I've had all kinds of confirmation of that just in the last few days. The enthusiasm there is unbelievable. We're back and maybe it's, the business side is most enthusiastic about this, but it's just amazing to crack open, the Economic Times every day and see wonderful stories about how this is energizing not only domestic business, but the international business. They're just waiting at the door to invest when something like this happens. The excitement of it goes up in a great way. So yes, need for improvement, but everybody's very excited about what's actually going on now and hopeful that this is just the beginning of continued reforms that will take India to the point where it will be much more seamless to do business here. Long way to go.
So just coming with the fact that you shared with us, in the US the capacity utilization is not reaching that top 100%, nearby 100%. How you find out, how did you analyze how it has reached so fast to that level? What is that? Because what you were stating with us regarding the retail 5%, the growth was 5%. But how come the capacity utilization has reached to that level? Have you analyzed that thing? What was the reason for that recovery?
Well, I sure wish I had my slides here because there are a number of things that we can talk about. First of all, we're talking excitedly about the fact that the housing sector is recovering, so that's contributing to it. But the auto sector is almost fully recovered now. I mean, auto sales in the United States crashed. They were around 17 to 18 million units. They plunged to 9 million units a year. The math is just horrendous. A 50% drop in a very key sector with integration right across the U.S. economy, with jobs right across the U.S. economy. This was very much in the U.S. economy. They're right back up to 14 to 15 million units of sales, and that's very sustainable. They also have the average age of vehicles on the road in the U.S. at the moment is 10 years, which may not be big in India, but that's huge in the U.S. To have average vehicles on the U.S. roads at 10 years old, unthinkable. And so there is a lot of pent-up demand, even though that market has recovered. So that's the kind of organic growth in the United States that's leading to the using up of this capacity. They've also done very well in international markets. There's a bit of conspiracy theory around the way that China and the U.S. kept beating up on each other's currencies or each other's policies. China was furious because the U.S. was printing money and they believed that that was going to debase the renminbi, which was tied to the U.S. currency. And so they kept threatening to sell their U.S. dollars off. Well, they hold so many of those things that I never believed that they were going to do that. They were actually, I think, engineering depreciation of the currency to try and get their trade sector back up again. And the U.S. would protest, but behind the scenes, I'm sure that they were smiling because it depreciated their currency versus all the other currencies in the world and actually generated a phenomenal amount of export growth for quite a substantial period of time. So while the domestic economy in the U.S. wasn't doing that well, they had a trade sector that was contributing to growth quite substantially. So that helped them actually to build up their capacity utilization as well. And so couple that together with the 70% of the economy that has been growing at a 5% rate for quite some time, that gets you right back there. That all elements of the economy that are contributing toward the success of capacity utilization. So it's right back up there. And I wish I had the actual slides to show you because I try to be as dramatic as I can with words, but the picture is just amazing. You just have to see it to believe it. Any other questions, sir?
So, my question is, when is it the forecasting that you have done? What is the time when you actually see Canada really investing in India that heavily? And the question is basically because the Indian model which you have drawn here, it's true, and India has been able to do this because it has been able to split the manufacturing segment, and people have been able to move from this agricultural segment to the service segment directly. So manufacturing is not the strength of India as of now, and it definitely is the strength of China. Population is an argument that Indian population is younger, and that's why India presents a promising picture. Then that will be an argument which will hold only probably after 2030. because India meets the Chinese population somewhere in 2040, I guess. So until unless you are speaking about forecasting which is saying that in say 20, 30 years is when you will be actually, till then you will be investing in, you will be able to wait till then to reap the benefits of the investments that you are speaking about. Because you are, I can see that you are stressing majorly on the manufacturing sector.
Right.
And if it is manufacturing sector, so all I'm saying is that India will be able to skip this manufacturing sector to continue to move to service sector in future also, until unless there is somebody who really wants to invest in manufacturing sector. By itself, that might not come.
Okay, first of all, with respect to the time frame, we believe that 2013 is the year when global growth is really going to pick up in a big way. First in the United States, and then subsequently in other economies. So that's the time frame we're looking at. The difficult period for Canada is 2016, because we've had a labor force that has been growing through time. We've always been able to count on a growing labor force. But that important segment of our labor force, the 50 to 54 age cohort, that's the cohort with the highest rates of participation in the Canadian labor force, starts going negative in a big way. We lose a lot of people on a net basis, and that's with aggressive immigration. So, again, that's a chart I wish I could show you, because it's a sea change in Canadian population. We're not really psychologically prepared for that happening. So that's a period of time where I believe businesses are going to be catching up to that reality and looking for places in the rest of the world where they can create some capacity. You're absolutely right to say you can't put investment there instantly. It's going to be another couple of years before you actually see widgets coming off the end of the line. And so there will be lags there, and that's a zone of great difficulty and risk for any institution. They will have to be very creative over that 2-year period of time to process the orders that are actually coming our way. And that will be the acid test of whether we can actually get to this transformative model. Why I disagree with the notion that India's hopes are all inside of the service sector is that currently India is not able to create enough skilled workers like yourselves to feed this sector. So when I've talked to senior officials inside of the biggest companies in India, Birla Group, Tata, Larsen, Turbo, the list goes on. Their biggest problem, I believe, is not the world falling off a fiscal cliff. It's not the nascent slowdown that is happening. Everybody agrees that in the long run, India's growth path is 7, 8, call it even 9% going forward. So nobody's worried about India getting back to that growth trajectory, or very few are anyway. So the difficulty is, if you've got a labor crunch in a particular part of the economy, I didn't finish the thought on what they were saying. The number one risk is retention. So what companies are doing is actually, because of the paucity of high-skilled labor, they're trading workers back and forth. Well, how does a company entice somebody to another company? They increase the wage package. And that's called in economic terms a wage spiral. And you can spiral wages for as long as you like, but eventually you're going to hit a threshold where it's no longer competitive to do that inside of your own economy. So that mechanism undermines all of the success here if you don't have something else to back it up. And that's where this is the solution. If this part of the economy is not there, there isn't that escape valve that causes growth to continue. This is a real concern. Untold amounts of money are being invested to make sure that there's as much capacity as possible being created here. But it's already not being created quickly enough. So there are constraints. Now, that is a growth sector, but there is a huge risk around how much growth can be generated there before the work starts getting reshored into the United States or offshored into other countries that do have that skilled labor capacity. So that's my concern there. That's how we add up those dynamics. We're highly concerned about that. So for us to see an India that has 8% potential growth, this is a necessary element. This is not going to do it on its own. Any other questions? Yes. You guys